Thank you so much, Lynn. Good to be back here. Good to hear your voice again. And I really look forward to speaking every week. I guess we're going to be here Thursdays, 7 to 8 p.m. And I'm going to see about getting access set up so that I can actually have a one-on-one conversation with different people if they want to come in. It is the way I prefer to work. And thank you for the sound check. That's great. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for hanging in for this hour. My name is Cindy Teevens, and I'm an author and a speaker. And I show people how to be happy for life without controlling or healing the past. Beyond that, I discovered through my own direct experience that if you take love and joy to an extreme, then you can detach from everything of the world. What would you need of it if you discovered this endless, bottomless pit of love, joy, bliss that was available to you no matter what was going on outside of you, no matter what was happening in the world? You would have no need for the world. No need for people to be a certain way, to not be a certain way. And this would be detachment from the world. It doesn't mean you don't engage the world. Oh, no. You do, more than you ever have, because there's nothing in the way anymore. When I say nothing, I mean no little mind, I thought, saying, well, I can't do that because of this, and what if they think that, or what if they do this, or what if this happens? That's all over. And so I encourage people to seek joy. Seek joy. Seek joy, no matter what, within. It was in the middle of my own intense suffering that I discovered this joy within that I didn't know was there my whole life. It's like thinking you're poor and sitting on a pot that's full of gold and you never knew it. And the gold is free. And it's yours. And it's unlimited. And I went around like a kid in a candy store who just knows the candy's free. So I pigged out. I was for weeks in states of bliss and ecstasy for absolutely no reason. And I was seeking it consciously on purpose. And this went on for some 9 months. But after a while, it started seeking me, in that it was happening spontaneously. It didn't have anything to do with the I who I thought I was at the time. And it was happening in places that the I really would rather it not happen in. Grocery stores, I'm talking about laughter and joy and love to such an extreme experience that there would be tears rolling down my face. And, I had a few experiences where friends would look at me and, are you okay? I'd be like, yeah, I'm more than okay. Don't worry. It will pass. And so I started to seek solitude. I used to go out into the woods on my own, and there was this magnet within me. The only way I can describe this is deeper and deeper into more and more stillness. And I would spend hours in the woods. And imagine having no interest in the world anymore. Not like, I'm just going to lay around here and do nothing. No, you don't need anything, you don't want anything anymore. A deep peace settled in, and an equanimity that everything was looked at as equal, and everything was love and joy. So then the question popped up, well, now what? Right? What to do with the world now? One thing left that I wanted, but it wasn't of this world. I wanted to know the truth, reality, where I came from, where I'm going to, what this is all about. All those existential questions that all of us asked at some stage, probably when we were children mostly, and then that got swept underneath the carpet or suppressed or oppressed. Don't ask that question. Just go on with your life. Get married, have kids, get a job, grow up, get the gold watch, and then die. It always didn't fit very well with me, because it always seemed like there's something missing. And indeed, there was. And so there I was, being still by myself in the woods, in love, joy, bliss that was ever growing. Seeking the only thing left. I was single-mindedly seeking the only thing that mattered to me anymore. And that was to know God, source, divine, whatever words you want to use, truth. And it was through this single-minded, you could call it devotion. I didn't call it devotion at the time. It was just love. I fell in love with love. And during this time period, I had also been practicing self-inquiry to the best of my knowledge as to what it meant, which I learned later wasn't truly what it meant. Meditation, Zen meditation, and walking meditation in the woods. And it was 9 months after the discovery of this joy that I have access to that I was in the woods one day, and an explosion of love in the middle of this deep contemplation knocked me to my knees crying with an intensity I've never felt before, and the tears were just a watershed. And I looked up from my knees at the trees, and it was the end of time, self, and other. And I saw through this body-mind for the first time that the trees are me. And I looked at every tree, and every tree is me. And every rock, and every stone, and every blade of grass, and every single thing. And there was complete shock. I could not have imagined this. This is nothing like the saying people say, we're all one. This is without we. There is no we who's all one. This is just one. And I couldn't speak. I went to say, it's me. But there was no me to speak. However, there was instantaneous knowing, no need to speak. Who would I speak to? And eventually thought came back, and speech came back, but when it did, it was way over to my left and faint and weak, and I recognized it as who I used to think I was. And I burst out laughing, and I couldn't stop laughing. I was laughing so hard I fell on my back, and the tears strolled down my face, laughing and crying at the cosmic joke. With the realization of there's nothing to do, nowhere to go, no problems whatsoever. With a diamond-hard reality. Reality that doesn't change, whilst everything else around it does. The phenomenal world. So what I'll be speaking about every week is really on recognizing the truth. It's a broad topic, and we can have a lot of subtopics underneath. And if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the room, and I peek up now and again and see if there's anything there. Recognizing truth. What is one of the very powerful things that came to me before what I call it the direct seeing of self, of my all as the self. One of the things that came to me before was a distaste for concepts, ideas, beliefs. I found them to be lacking. None of them satisfied, none of them fulfilled. So I wasn't interested in just parroting some learned thought, belief, idea that I picked up somewhere else, like we're all one. It's okay, it's a nice seed of an idea if you haven't heard it before. But if you stop at it, it's a dead end. If you don't press further and inquire further into what that actually means, what that actually is, If you become satisfied with a good feeling thought, like we're all one, then you'll never truly seek. And if you never truly seek, you'll never truly find. And the other thing was that I learned we need to question everything we think we know. All our dearest, closest held beliefs about ourselves, about others, about the world, about God even. And question even the ones that we were taught. The Buddha, Jesus, Krishna, all of them. Because of course what you've got is secondhand knowledge. And Buddhas and Jesus and Krishna's awakening won't do anything for you. Secondhand knowledge won't do anything for you. Again, it's a nice little seed that we need to have planted just to crack open our minds, just to loosen up our beliefs about ourselves and the world, so that something else can be possible. Because as long as you will only believe what you'll only believe, nothing else is possible for you. So questioning became very important to me and very obvious when I, first heard the fact, it's a fact, that no question is, every question is a statement of what you think you already know. So a question that came up to me when I was walking in the woods before the explosion of love, it came because I was seeking God. Why was I seeking God? I'm seeking God because I have false knowledge that I don't see God. Even though I had the parroted knowledge that God is everywhere. Turn over a stone, there's God. And so false knowledge conflicts with truth. But we're not aware of it until they kind of clash. So I'm walking in the woods, desperately seeking God with all my heart. And which means I'm not seeing God. In my experience, of course I was seeing God. You can't not see God. For all is God. But there I was seeking God. God is everywhere. Turn over a stone, God is everywhere. So there I was parroting the false knowledge. It's only false because it's only conceptual. But I went on faith with it, and we do have to go on faith a little bit, but we have to hold faith up to great doubt. Together, they have to work everywhere. Okay, well, if God's everywhere, how come it's not obvious? That was the question. That question only arises because I have false knowledge that I'm not looking at God. So, if God is everywhere, how come it's not obvious? Is that really a question? If I were to try to answer that question, I could make up all kinds of concepts and ideas. And, I'm not ready yet. I'm not good enough. I didn't live enough lives. I didn't meditate enough. Mind is masterful at this. So it's very important that we ask the right questions. And actually, it's very important that we question the question. So my question was, how come God's not obvious? What's assumed in that question? What is the pre-existing knowledge that I'm accepting to be true in that? What I'm accepting to be true is God is not obvious. So in the moment when the false knowledge hit the truth, and the truth showed itself up in obvious plain day. My God, this world is a miracle, moment to moment a miracle, and nobody really understands it. Scientists can only explain a certain amount, but really, at the root, they don't get it. What we're doing here, how this came to be here, how this is possible, how a seed can become a tree, how a leaf or a flower grows out into the middle of nowhere called space. And when the truth of my direct experience of knowing that this is actually a miracle, this thing called life is a miracle. That life itself is God in action. And when that clashed up against, well, how come it's not obvious? Boom. It was like my attention went from the thought, which was obvious, to God, which was subtle because the thought was obvious, because I was holding it to be true and important, and therefore what we hold to be true and important appears obvious. So it was a switch of attention, and the answer came back in the gap. God is subtle. God comes before all else is subtle. Boom. Explosion. Love. Joy. Recognition. What I'm looking at, what I'm actually looking at, is God. You see, we never actually see what we're actually looking at. We see the assumed thought knowledge, the parroted information that we've collected. And we don't see the content of it, we see the thought. And there's a huge difference. Massive difference. It's sort of like a young child looking up at a tree, experiencing a massive tree for the first time. Awe of it, speechlessly. And an adult comes along and says, "That's a tree." And the child looks at the adult and then mouths the word tree, tree. Now what is the child experiencing? The word tree, not the tree. So no thought is true. No thought is true. Every thought is after the fact. Every thought is the past. And I'm not talking about the content, I'm talking about the actual thought. One day I was washing the floor and I pushed the bucket real hard and the water sloshed up and over and went everywhere. And I'm watching it run. And it was moments later when it quit running, mind piped up and said, "There's water on the floor." And I laughed. Thank you very much, Peanut Gallery. Like I didn't know there was water on the floor. Thought and reality. And the people who suffer the most are living as thought. They are going through the world, walking and moving through the world, to whatever degree they are, but they're in their heads. To them, the world is what's going on in their heads. And people who get really depressed, that's because they're completely out of touch with life. I work with people who've been suicidal or depressed, and often they'll say, "It's like I'm dead." And I get it. You're not, of course. But you see, that's another example how a thought can be completely out of touch with reality. The thought comes up, "It's like I'm dead." Well, that's ridiculous, because you're not. But they believe that. Imagine how it is to believe the thought, "I'm dead." Ugh. This will depress you. The reality is you're sitting here, you're talking to me, or you're listening to me, your heart is pumping, you're very much alive. And so what happens with most people is they don't know, if they ever knew. I think they did. I think we all knew as children the difference between a thought and reality. And when we lose that distinction is when we start to suffer, is when we start to feel separate from the rest of our family and our friends and the world. And so I speak about the 5 powers everybody was born with. And one of them is the power of discernment. Even if you haven't been using it, you still have it. You've never lost it. You've just not been using it. The power of discernment, to be able to discern the difference between a thought and what is. And meditation can go a long way to helping you establish that. I'm talking about meditation sitting still, not following a guided meditation of any sort or contemplating any kind of ideas, but sitting still and watching life and noticing what's a thought and what's not. I had a client who was suicidal who got this lesson in a very big way. You see, he was sitting down and he heard somebody outside of his room, and up came, what if they come in? Then I have to defend myself. And he's got this whole story going on in his head. And nothing has happened. And it was shocking to him to have this realization. Wow, that whole thing is nothing to do with what's here and now, except that it's appearing as thoughts, images, sounds in the head. But the story in the head doesn't have any existence anywhere outside between the ears. And this is why we have nearly 8 billion people living in 8 billion different worlds. They're all living in their own separate world inside the head. However, we still have the physical, actual world in common. And that's where we get clashes, and that's where we get wars and crimes and abuse. Because we can believe that the story in our head is so real and so important that it can become life or death for them. Believing this. So we have a question here. Does a person's belief in their thought make it real for them? It doesn't make it real. It's still just a story in the head. But one of the other, I'm going to talk about more of the powers that you were born with. You were born with the power of awareness and power of attention. And power of attention is extremely useful. But usually it goes on auto-conscious control of it, and it just goes wherever habitually or whatever grabs the attention or whatever. So if you put all of your power of attention into the stream of thinking in your head, then it kind of magnifies it. It magnifies the what you see, what you hear, what you feel, all hooked onto the story in the head. And so if it magnifies it, it appears to be more real. But it doesn't matter what's going on in the head, it's still not real. It's still something that's going to disappear. Have anybody here had the experience of driving across the city, getting to the other side, and not remembering the trip? You must have been there. You must have been on the highway, right? Well, what happened there is you were absorbed in the stream of thinking. And it's a miracle we don't have more accidents on the roads if it weren't for the speed of reaction of the body-mind. Because people are not here and now with what's actually going on primarily. So your beliefs in the thoughts don't make it real, but it may make it louder, brighter. But it doesn't matter how big or noisy that experience gets, it's still not real. I say that if something, and we tend to, if something feels bad, we'll have a bad thought arise and we'll believe it and get into the story. And I say, if it feels bad, don't accept it, suspect it, because it feels bad. Reality and truth never hurts mentally, emotionally. So that's your wake-up call. That pain and suffering is a gift that we can use to guide us, to wake us up out of the dream, out of the illusion. So we have another question. How do the stories in our head get there? Or is that secondary? Yeah. as you probably know through your experience, that a lot of the stories in your head have evolved. They're continually changing. They attach on to the entity called I, which would be another subject. But they evolve, they change, they come from experiences, they come from the I folding upon itself. One story becomes another, becomes another. Here's an example. So I had a client who was at a grocery store, and she was at the checkout, and she paid for the groceries and realized, I used the wrong debit card. What does that mean? And I used the wrong debit card. Well, card for groceries, and this is a card for other things, or something like that. So she had this recognition, I used the wrong debit card. Okay. The next thought was, he's not going to like that. The next thought was, he's going to be angry. And the next thought was, we're going to have such an argument tonight. And then the next thought was, I don't know if I can take any more. I can't deal with it. That's it, we're getting a divorce. So there she is at the grocery store. Nothing's happened, but she's getting a divorce. All on her own. Yes, imaginations, extrapolations. Thank you. I call this the deterioration of thinking. And here's what happens when you feel bad. A bad thought comes easily and effortlessly. And when you feel good, a good thought comes easily and effortlessly, right? So the first thought is not a problem. I used the wrong, debit card. But even that one feels a little off. The wrong one, the wrong one. Not, I used this one instead of that one. That's a bit more neutral. But I used the wrong one. Now you start to feel bad. And then another bad thought comes and you feel worse. And another one, and you feel worse. And you feel worse. And thinking will deteriorate to the degree where if you habitually feed this, you could get to just having thoughts of suicide all the time and not really know why. And if you have ever had a relationship with anybody and you've had a conversation and the conversation went crazy, it got to some point where you were just like, how did we get to here? This is not what I wanted. It's because thinking has deteriorated on both sides. It hasn't been interrupted. And both parties have been doing what I call mind reading, which is claiming to know what the other person is thinking or feeling. And that's a whole other topic in itself also. And the whole thing just deteriorates until it's just ugly. So learning to recognize when thinking is deteriorating and to interrupt it and to notice a thought for a thought and to notice what's not a thought is very important. It's very important in your relationships. It's also very important if you seek to know truth. So these are very practical, applicable things that I found worked for me. And I had really, truly zero tolerance for more thinking. And that's what concepts are. More thinking, The minute you have one concept about one thing, you're going to have a problem. And then you'll have to have another concept to repair that. And then another, and then another, and another. And, you end up with this crazy story that doesn't serve you. And you're lost. Now what? Where do you go? Yes, someone comments that they're a writer mainly processing these stories into fiction. Yeah, this is what, the mind has a creative capacity. We're not going to knock the mind that way. There's a creative ability. The mind has a purpose. And it is for creativity. It is for building things. It is for the relative world. But it's not who you are. And it can't know truth. And we try to discover truth with mind, you will be tortured. I was tortured, with mind until I quit using it. How do you maintain the power of attention? Okay. So your power of attention actually doesn't need maintaining. It's always here. It's always available. It's just, where is it directed, right? And first you have to learn what your power of attention actually is. And just talking about it conceptually is not going to do you any good. So would you like an actual demonstration? I'd prefer if we had people to... If you can give me feedback in the window here, then I can do this. So if you're willing to give me feedback as quickly as you can when I ask a question, okay, we got a bunch of yeses. Great, good, okay. So to demonstrate your attention, I can ask you one question. Are you feeling your right foot right now? Anybody? Got a yes? Got a laughter? Yeah. Is that laughter because you're feeling it now that I mentioned it? Roses? Yes. Very good. It's a very common reaction. If your foot was hurting, you may have already been noticing it, but if not, you likely weren't paying attention to it. That's what most people will say, right? If I asked you, what happened there? What happened? Had your foot stopped feeling? I know, your foot hadn't stopped feeling. Right. So people will say, awareness hadn't stopped. Awareness never stops, okay? Awareness, you can't turn it on, you can't turn it off. It is a free gift. It is completely effortless. How effortless is it to hear what you hear? Take any effort at all? I mean, it's before effort, isn't it? It's beyond effort. It's just, yeah, wow, good. Awareness, that's all I'm going to say about awareness. There's nothing to do about awareness. Just to know that it's there and be aware of awareness. That's about it. But your power of attention, so we'll return to some of the questions. I really enjoy your guys' questions. Thank you for the interactivity here. Yes, we will talk about discernment too. So your power, we're discerning your power of awareness from your power of attention right now. And so your power of attention, when I asked you about the foot, you said, oh yeah, there's my foot. Mm-hmm. And what happened? Why were you not aware of your foot before I mentioned it? People will say, I wasn't paying attention. How do you not pay attention? How do you not do anything? You can't not do something. What you're doing is you're doing something else. So you're paying attention to something else, like my words perhaps, or your thoughts about my words. Or you're watching the screen. So, no, your foot doesn't pay attention to you. That's another good question I use sometimes, and we may get to it, but I don't know, we're only got 20 minutes here, so I'm going to try and move it along. So, your power of attention, back to your foot, right? Can you sense into the top of your head? If you have trouble sensing into the top of your head, just wiggle your eyebrows. Okay, we got a yes, good. And you know, if you can become aware of your hair, maybe if you don't have hair, you might be aware of the breeze. Okay, got another yes, good. Okay, anybody else? It may take a little longer. You're not used to doing it. Okay, the scalp, yeah, good. Okay. Now, how about your left shoulder? Can you sense into your left shoulder? You might notice the feeling of clothing, the skin. Yes, good, good, thank you. Good. Okay, what happened to your foot? Anybody going to fess up? What happened to your foot? Good to hear some laughter there, or see some laughter there. Yeah. So you lost your foot. Well, not literally lost your foot. It went bye-bye. Yeah. So your power of attention, you see, you didn't forget it per se, but yeah, your attention was narrowed. Yes, focus is another good word. You narrowed your power of attention onto your foot the first time, and then onto the top of your head, and then onto your shoulder, and you've probably lost your head too. It wouldn't be a bad thing to lose your head. So your power of attention can contract and narrow. Okay? And that's what happens when someone gets into a blind rage. They become blind, deaf, and ignorant to what's going on around them. That's how they can cut somebody off and not really even know it. That's how they can be in this horrific rage and never see the pain on the person's face in front of them. They're looking at them, but they don't see it because all they see is what they have narrowed their attention on. They've become a very tiny being. Of course, they can't become that, but the experience is as such because the power of attention is narrowed. So your power of attention, I'd like you to feel into your feet again and then go to the top of your head. And notice, do you notice a movement? That's right, mere fiction. It doesn't matter what we narrow on, but we narrow on something. Can you go from your feet to your head and feel the movement of your power of attention? It feels like a movement, but really it's a narrowing on the feet, it's an opening up, and then it's a narrowing on the head. So there's this sense of like a movement. Good. Right on. Okay. So your power of attention can narrow. It can also open. So feel into your feet and the top of your head at the same time. And take in your peripheral vision, looking straight ahead. Look, just pick a spot in front of you, look a little downward. Feel into your feet, the top of your head, take in your peripheral vision. And now notice your breath moving in and moving out, because it is moving, right? Did you lose that too? It's a good thing we don't have to remember to breathe, right? Okay, just do that for an in-breath and an out-breath. Simultaneously. What's that like? If this is work for you, it's because you're trying to narrow. You're trying to go to your foot, your head, you're trying to do it all at once and it won't work. You have to relax and open. Feel your feet, the top of your head, take in your peripheral vision. Notice your breath moving in and moving out. What's that like? It's awfully quiet. Ah, peace. Good. Yes, peace. Why is it peaceful? Why is it quiet? I mean, you hear what you hear. It's not like you stop hearing. But somehow it's quiet, peaceful. Yes. No thought. Yes. Thought stops. Yes, you're getting the ice cream truck. You heard that. It just drove by my place. You can hear that, but still there's this peace. Why is the peace? No thought. Why is there no or little thought? Because you've pulled your power from the stream of thinking, your power of attention. You've pulled it from the head and put it into the senses. I call this coming to your senses. Okay? People who try to stop thinking and they put their attention on their thinking, they're just firing it up. If you want to calm the mind, then come to your senses. Simultaneously, all at once. You're very welcome, Roses. You're very welcome. And now, in this peace, do you exist? Are Are you here? No, it's important. Just feel into your feet, the top of your head. Take in your peripheral vision. Notice your breath moving in and moving out. Are you here? Yes, you're here. As what you are, we don't need to know. But you know you're here. You're here. I just want you to notice you're here. And thought is not. So the whole story you've carried about yourself your whole life is not here. Who are you now? Who you are now is who you have always been, even when thought was present. It's just been so loud, you've confused yourself with it. I understand, willingness. You felt so good that you don't care whether you exist or not. However, is that a thought? Don't touch it. Stay with the experience. So the question was, how do you maintain the power of attention? And the answer is you don't maintain it. You just use it correctly instead of incorrectly. I think the question meant, I'm not quite positive what the question meant, but perhaps it meant, how do you stay in the senses? By not going out into thought. When you go out into thought, if you practice this and you keep practicing this, it will become habitual. And when you go out into thought, you'll feel constricted because you're narrowing your power of attention. The body will narrow, literally, physically narrow, contract. This is why people get tension headaches when they're in their story and the mind is contracted. Well, the body gets held captive to that too, and it gets contracted, and everything gets tightened and knotted up. And you ever have that experience, and suddenly there's this release, this drop, then you've come to your senses, and you let the body go. So the whole thing's been running on crazy autopilot. The thinking, the attention. Okay, so there's your power of awareness, attention. I already showed you your power of interest, but you didn't know you had it, just like the rest of these. Your power of interest is what you're most interested in. Yes, when you let go and you relax, you get a deep exhalation because you've usually held the breath. And breathe again. Body likes this. So your power of interest is what you're most interested in. If you're most interested in the story in your head, that's what you're going to get. And it's going to appear real. It's going to appear like that's all there is, when it's nothing compared to the rest of existence, of reality. Mind is a very linear, limited tool. And it goes off the rails when we confuse ourselves, when we become identified with it. And exposing the ego is a whole other process that I don't do publicly ever. But that is the knot. Ego is not a bad thought. Ego is not a good thought. Ego is not a thought. Ego is identification. Ego means I. So there's the real you and the false you. And it's not the content of a thought that makes a false you. It's just content of a thought. Content of a thought doesn't matter. Ego is the not that doesn't exist. And it's just purely based on a confusion of who you are. It's a case of mistaken identity. When living in the head, you believe the story, you believe the content attached onto the I, the false I. And it can come with a mix of body identification, believing yourself to be the body. But this is another topic again. We could go off on each one of these for an hour. So, your powers, now that you know them, can serve you consciously. Yeah, here's a good question. Do feelings come from thoughts, or are feelings separate? I call them thought feelings. They arise together. Sometimes people will say, this feeling came up out of nowhere. Well, no. It's not like that. Something came before it. Something came with it, as it. And thoughts, though, are faster than feeling. You can have a number of thoughts really quickly come and start to feed a feeling in the body. There's a neurologist, I can't think of her name off the top of my head, who said that the body experiences a believed thought. I say believed thought, not just any thought. Because if you don't believe it, you're not giving it your power of attention or interest. It's not going to get any juice. So she would say the body can only experience or hold or process a feeling for 30 seconds. 30 seconds. That's it. So a thought comes, feeling lasts 30 seconds, thought's long gone. Maybe there's another one coming in. It's starting to deteriorate because thoughts are faster. And yet they affect feeling, and feeling affects thought. So that's why I lump them together. And if you interrupt this and you quit feeding the fire, then 30 seconds and the feeling will subside. Someone says, I speak of feeling my thoughts or thinking my feelings. Yeah. Thought feelings arise, If you get into concepts about it, it's not going to serve you. It's to notice how you're feeling right now, and is it good, is it bad, and what thought is present with it. To notice, that the thought is not you, is not the body. The feeling is not you, is not the body. Alone, separate. Of course, nothing is separate. So I use a practice I call alchemy, which shifts your state to show you how to feel good first, easily and effortlessly. And when you feel bad thoughts come easily and effortlessly. Instead of trying to do positive thinking, which is forcing a good thought on a bad feeling. So you've got this really solid, because it lasts longer, feeling and belief that you're clinging to, some attachment. And you're trying to take this flimsy thought and force it on it. And it really goes nowhere. But when you shift your state first, clarity comes, thinking shifts, and you now are open to wisdom that you didn't have when you were in a tiny state, a tiny contraction. So you open. You open to reality, you open to other possibilities, you open to knowledge and wisdom. And that changes everything. Villains become victims. You have these major aha moments. Are you saying that thoughts and feelings aren't always clearly one or the other for me. No, they're not. They're thought feelings. You can sense a thought because there's language, there's a structure, and it arises with a feeling. We don't need to do much more with them than that. In fact, if you do the inquiry at this point, the self-inquiry, you just notice that's a thought, that's a feeling. The moment you notice it's a thought and a feeling, you notice what else? It's not you. Yeah, and you probably notice it dissipates or disappears depending on how strong it is. Because you're not associating with it anymore. You're not identifying with it anymore. Now there's a gap. It was always there. But because your attention is opened, it becomes more obvious to you. You're not a thought. You're not a feeling. Wow. Isn't that a blessing? Thank God for that. Because otherwise this would be hell on earth for everybody. No way out. And it's not true. We only have a few more minutes left. Yeah, no, you don't need to run from them. I mean, with alchemy, you can shift them. You can use what you don't want. Look at it. It's very important, I think, to actually look at what you don't want, because that's your attachment. You see, with alchemy, once you shift your state, you look back from the better state. It blows out your attachment, so it will not arise again. You're done with it. Whereas sometimes if you just observe, you don't get the learnings, so the attachment isn't broken, and it can raise its ugly head again and again and again and again. And then you might start with ideas like, geez, what's wrong with me? How come I can't do this? I've been practicing spirituality for 10 years, and I've read A Course in Miracles 5 times, and there's nothing wrong with you. Nothing. You just yet haven't learned the differences between your powers of attention, your powers of interest, your power of discernment, your power of authority, your powers and your powers and your powers. You don't know. It's you're not to blame. You're very, very welcome, Roses. We weren't taught because those who came before us didn't know. It's time we start sharing. So we can stop the inherited insanity. It is inherited. That's why my second book, which I wrote, is called The Happiness Lie, is called The Happiness Lie. The subtitle is What Generations Have Been Told That Makes You Unhappy. My first book was Alchemy, How to Feel Good No Matter What, and I'm working on a third one that actually is about the experience in the woods and what led up to it and the aftermath. And I'm not going to tell you the title of that one yet. Any questions on your powers, how to use them? On recognizing? Oh, yes, my last name is Teevens. You will not find alchemy available anywhere right now. It is in going through second edition. It's sold out. The Happiness Lie you can get on Amazon or from my website, which is alchemylovejoy.com. All one word. Alchemy, AlchemyLovejoy.com. So this is a good beginning for recognizing truth. It's not the ultimate. I can't do the ultimate in this type of scenario. It really has to be done live, one-on-one. So either in a Skype call or on Google+. Sometimes I used to do a program once a week on Google+. It'll start up again in the fall. Thanks for typing that out there, sweets. But we can certainly look at our beliefs that we hold to be true, and with a very open mind, of course, question them. Because, geez, what if they're not true? What if the thing that you've been using to limit yourself isn't true? What if you can experience love, joy, and bliss beyond belief? That's what I discovered. Just the reason is because you're alive. What I call alchemy is not the alchemy that most other people are talking about. Alchemy for me is a fundamental, irreversible transformation, human transformation, which in a way it is what the people years gone by, there was alchemy used to try to change lead into gold. That's a fundamental, irreversible change. And then there was also people using it to be able to practice their spirituality because they were being oppressed. And so they used it as code. And so there's people who actually think the code is really what they were really teaching, and they're not understanding that it was just code pointing to something else. And when someone is pointing at something with their finger, we don't look at the finger. We look at what they're pointing to. That's the trick. And so I do a lot of pointing, mostly by questioning. The same way I was able to see truth, by questioning what I think I already know. Because it's what you think you already know that veils the truth. You think you're a separate being. And you see the thinking and the thoughts. But that's not what is. That's not the truth. Definitely getting someone who can point is very beneficial, very useful. I would not have had this experience if it weren't for those people. Papa G, Muji, there were a few other people. You can see I mentioned them all on my website. There's a video on my website of me talking with Muji some 3 or 4 months after the direct seeing, when the laughter was still about all I could do. Because I couldn't speak for about 5 years about this. It took some time to integrate and be able to form the words and, to be a pointer. Rather than just a blathering fool, which is what I was that night when I went to meet my spiritual friends, and I wanted to say, "Oh my God, you won't believe what happened!" And then I went, "It was," and I couldn't speak. Of course, it's unspeakable. It was the most profound, yet the most normal, obvious thing at the same time. And I am out of trouble. I'm in trouble because I'm out of time. I've had a lot of fun with you guys. So I hope to maybe get to talk to you next week. If not, until then and until we talk again, seek joy, seek joy, seek joy. And you're very, very welcome. Thank you all very much for playing along and entertaining with your open minds and giving me your time and space and presence. I appreciate it. Have a good week.